but not the most successful for me from a financial standpoint. But it was a lot of fun. Really happy I went, and I got to spend some time with some friends down there. It was very enjoyable. So happy to be back at it. We'll be back in full swing this week. There's not as many, we don't have the major sports going on as much, but we are going to still finish through with baseball, and we've got a long ways to go left in the season. So let's focus on making some money this week. I'm going to go game by game. Sheets is out today. I'm going to go game to game quickly and talk through what I like on this slate from a DFS perspective. All right, let's go. Start with the first one. I've got Pittsburgh and Chicago first, so we're going to start there. Hopefully, let's make sure my screen is showing right. Yeah, it looks like it's pretty good. You can see a game with a decent total. It's both Smiley. I mean, like we've seen Smiley already get hit in this matchup, but I just want to take a quick look at how the weather's looking, because obviously that's fairly important. Yeah, I mean, so it's a pretty decent hitting day for Pittsburgh. You have a little wind blowing in from the left. I think both these teams are extremely viable stacks. If you forced me to pick one, I probably would pick Pittsburgh. And I think Smiley, you could take a gamble with him, but I just want to remind everybody that Pittsburgh's actually been much better offensively than maybe they get credit for. Bebo is another one you could consider if you wanted to go spend all the way down. Probably not what I'm going to be doing on this slate, but I think they're certainly viable enough. And again, I think the Cubs are viable as well. I just happen to personally like the Pittsburgh side a little bit better. You see that Pittsburgh's going to have some ownership, so you do get a lower owned Cubs team if you wanted to go that direction. All right, we have a little bit of a weather issue in this game, so we don't really know what how likely it is to play. And it seems like a very good spot to play bats. I mean, Cincinnati is basically like just right there with Coors anyway. You have a little bit of wind, going side to side. It's 73 degrees, a nice day in Cincinnati. It's a game with a huge total that we want to play. Assuming that it does go ahead and play. I actually think like both sides are very interesting here. And I think that as usual, Cincinnati side will be much more popular than the Colorado side. So Colorado is something I'm definitely considering as a way of getting different. And I think that it's every bit as viable as Cincinnati today. So I don't mind taking the lower ownership. The only problem with Colorado is hard to find too many bats you really love to play. I mean, Diaz obviously makes a lot of sense. Montero, depending on where he hits, because of the price. Then you've got Nolan Jones. So they're just going to be lower owned than I think than I think they should be. So I'm definitely open to doing a little bit of business, as Sheets would say, in that game. Moving over, we've got Minnesota and Boston. I think that Paxton and Lopez are both extremely viable today. This game in Minnesota, so it's a big park downgrade for Boston, obviously. You do have 10-mile-an-hour winds blowing in. It's 88 degrees, however, which is a little bit concerning. But this is a pretty weak lineup out there from Minnesota. At the same time, they also have some really interesting value pieces. I'm putting in Paxton and Lopez both on my list as probably two of my favorites right now. I think if I had to pick between the two of them as of right now, given the ownership, I'd probably go Lopez. Given the matchup, I'd go Paxton. So it's both sides are certainly viable. And I don't think I'd want to stack here, but I certainly wouldn't mind some of the value pieces taking some shots against Paxton. Probably less so to take shots off of Lopez, but you do have some really cheap options if you wanted to go that route, depending on how the lineup shakes out. Arizona and Milwaukee. This is interesting because I think you're going to have Burns as the most popular pitcher on the slate. And I'm not even sure he should be the most popular pitcher in this game. I actually like in smaller slates, as always, Kelly's been much better this year, but I've always been a guy who stacks against him, especially on smaller slates or at least mini stacks against him. I don't mind that idea with a little bit of Milwaukee, but I also think both these pitchers are totally viable, and I will probably be avoiding Burns just because of how little Arizona strikes out and how dangerous they are. You're going to have a similar type of thing with Scherzer, which is partly why Paxton and Lopez stand out. So Burns is completely in play for me, but I will probably be below that 40% ownership that he's at in first looks. All right, let's talk about the Texas-Chicago game. You have a little bit of wind blowing out in this one. This feels like a good spot to stack both teams, sort of like I mentioned earlier. And I also think that you always have, look, just absolutely every time he pitches, Andrew Heaney is always going to be an elite tournament option because of his strikeout rate. He's also going to be a candidate for a guy who can get completely lit up. You look at the White Sox, over here, it's 11 mile-an-hour winds blowing out to right field. And you've got a fairly healthier Chicago lineup with a little bit of pop in there with Berger, assuming that he's in there. Really, assuming the line shakes out like this 1-5 on Chicago certainly makes a lot of sense, as does the entire Texas team. But as we always mention, they are for the most part very expensive. Maybe Robbie Grossman's in the lineup today, and that we can use as a little bit of a discount. In terms of ownership here, I do think that everyone's going to have some ownership, but it's not going to be out of control because it's just too hard to play too many Texas guys. And I think you'll see more ownership on Chicago depending on how the lineup shakes out. But I do like these. These are probably two of my favorite teams in the slate, and I think they're both really, really in play here. Both full stacks and pieces. It's just hard to get the full Texas stack in and afford reasonable pitching on DraftKings. Easier to do on FanDuel. Scherzer, Hunter Brown. I think both Brown and Scherzer are right there near the top for me. I understand Scherzer was really bad in a couple outings this year. I'm not going to let myself overthink it. I will probably end up playing him tonight. I do like him a little bit better given the price discount and the ownership discount from Corbin Burns. And as we said about Houston, look, they're a good offense, but we don't have what's his name in the lineup, and we don't have obviously he's still out. Why can't I think of his name? Jordan Alvarez. And it's just a fairly more pedestrian lineup this year. We haven't seen the big explosions from Bregman and Altuve for the most part this year. So I'm okay with using Scherzer, and I have Hunter Brown as definitely a good GPP option. I like the Metro team I don't mind targeting, although I expect them to pick it up in the second half of the season, or actually starting now. I think they should be able to pick it up. San Francisco and San Diego to close it out. San Francisco, we're seeing this year strike out more often against righties than they have in the past, but they also have some power. I'm not probably going to – I'd like to get confirmation of who's actually pitching for San Francisco before I decide if I want to play them. But as of right now, I don't have it as Logan Webb. I don't know why that's showing up. It's probably going to be a bullpen game. But anyway, either way, I don't have a ton of interest in this game for DFS purposes. I think that getting some exposure to Waka and some to San Francisco are interesting. I actually think a really low-owned San Francisco stack on a day where not a ton is standing out is kind of interesting. The problem is you just have to deal with it when they bring in a lefty, and then Jock Peterson sits and you're spending $4,500 for him. Maybe Lamont and Wade even, or Yastrzemski. Just something to keep in mind as always a potential danger when with these starting lineups for the Giants. Although they've been a little less pinch hitty this year. So I have the Giants actually behind Texas and Chicago, but I do think that they're probably the next team I would want to use for a full stack. I think I'm going to end up using Scherzer and one of Paxton or Lopez as my main lineup kind of guys, and then I think Heaney and Brown are really good tournament plays. So that's a quick rundown of what I want to do on this slate. It's going to be a long, a lot more we'll know when the starting lineups come out, because it is Monday, so we expect to get some weird starting lineups. I'll be live with you guys at 6 Eastern to go over every final thoughts. And I hope you all have a great day, and good luck to everybody today. Please like and subscribe, and we'll